His world tilted. The air in the federal courtroom was thick and silent, but for Graham Perry, it was roaring. The voice that had just spoken, the one that said, "The court is now in session," was a ghost. It was the voice that had haunted his dreams for 10 years. He looked up from his designer-suited cufflink, his blood turning to ice. It wasn't possible. The woman on the judicial bench, draped in black robes, her face a mask of iron and authority, was Callie, his wife, the wife who had vanished, the wife he'd had declared legally dead, and she was about to preside over the trial that would decide the rest of his life. The penthouse at 15 Central Park West wasn't just an apartment, it was a statement. It was a 1,000-square-foot monument to Graham Perry's ego, and by extension, Callie Scott's sacrifice. Callie, at 34, was already a junior partner at Sullivan & Cromwell, a feat that had required her to bill hours that blurred weekdays into weekends and months into years. She was the legal mind, the scalpel. Graham was the face, the hammer. His company, Perry Dynamics, was the darling of Wall Street, promising AI-driven logistics that would revolutionize global shipping. Together, they were the golden couple. Brilliant, beautiful, and utterly ruthless in their ascent. Their life was a curated performance. Dinners at Per Se Summers in the Hamptons and galas, where Callie's smile was as expertly tailored as her Oscar de la Renta gown. But lately the performance had felt strained. Graham, high on a new round of Series C funding, had become different, more dismissive. His charm, once a warm spotlight, now felt like a harsh interrogation lamp. "You're a lawyer, Callie," he'd said just last week, swirling a $3,000 bottle of Chateau Margaux. "You analyze risk. I am the risk. I'm the one who moves." She had dismissed it as stress. The pressure to innovate to justify the absurd $9 billion valuation was immense. So when she managed to wrap her deposition in Chicago a day early, she felt a genuine pang of excitement. She would surprise him. They would order in, open a bottle of wine that wasn't for investors, and maybe, just maybe, talk about something other than algorithms and stock options. The private elevator opened directly into their foyer. The apartment was quiet. 10 p.m. He should have been home. "Graham," she called out, slipping her heels off on the cold white marble. No answer. Then she heard it. Not a word, but a sound. A low, throaty laugh that was definitively not her own. It was coming from the master bedroom. Callie's body went cold before her mind caught up. The adrenaline was instant, a chemical fire that sharpened every sense. The smell of expensive perfume, not her Chanel No. 5, but something heavier, muskier. The faint sound of neo-soul music playing from the bedroom's integrated speakers. She didn't walk. She stalked. Her briefcase holding the victorious deposition files fell from her hand, its contents spilling across the Persian silk rug. She didn't care. She pushed the solid oak door. It swung open silently. And there was her life shattered into 1,000,000 pieces. Graham was there, yes, but he was secondary. The focal point was the woman. She was impossibly young, all limbs and honey-blonde hair, sitting on Callie's side of the bed, wearing Callie's silk anniversary robe, the one Graham had bought her from a boutique in Paris. And in her hand was Callie's favorite crystal glass, filled with their celebratory champagne, the Dom Perignon they were saving. The model she had to be a model was named Sienna Reed. Callie knew this because she'd seen her face on the digital billboards in Times Square advertising Perry Dynamics. The future is fluid, the tagline read. Sienna's eyes widened a perfect O of feigned surprise. Graham, who had been standing by the window overlooking the park, buttoning his shirt, froze. He didn't look guilty. He looked annoyed. That was the part that broke Callie. Not the betrayal, but the inconvenience. "Callie," he said, his voice flat. "You're home early." "Get out," Callie whispered. Her voice was unrecognizable, a dry rasp. Sienna giggled, a real tinkling laugh. "Oops," she said, taking another sip of champagne. "I guess this is the part where I leave. Get out of my robe." Callie's voice was louder now, vibrating with a rage so pure it terrified her. Sienna stood, letting the silk fall open. She was naked underneath. She sauntered past Callie, purposefully brushing her shoulder. "He likes me better in it, anyway," she whispered, then disappeared down the hall. The elevator chimed, signaling her departure. Callie stood in the doorway, her body rigid. She looked at the rumpled sheets, the discarded champagne bottle, the second glass. She looked at Graham. He sighed, running a hand through his perfectly coiffed hair. He walked to the minibar in the bedroom and poured himself a scotch. "Well," he said, not looking at her, "this is awkward." "Awkward," Callie repeated. The word was acid. "That's what this is, Graham, awkward. What do you want me to say?" "Callie, that I'm sorry." "Fine, I'm sorry. It was a mistake. She means nothing. She was in my robe, Graham, drinking our champagne, in our bed. So it's just a thing, Callie, a piece of fabric." He finally turned to her, and his eyes were cold, strategic. "Don't be so dramatic. It's beneath you. We have the gala for the Children's Fund on Friday. We need to present a united front." He was already managing the problem. She wasn't his wife. She was a variable, a complication in his narrative. "I am not a line item in your PR strategy, Graham. You're my wife, and you've benefited just as much from this as I have. Do you think you made partner at 34 just on your merits? My name, my connections opened those doors." It was a lie, a cruel, calculated lie designed to wound her, and it found its mark. Her work, her one pure, untouched achievement, he was tainting it. "You're disgusting," she said, the words heavy with a finality that sobered him. He put the glass down. The mask of indifference dropped, replaced by something harder. "Be careful, Callie," he said, his voice a low threat. "You're emotional right now. You're not thinking clearly. Don't make this messy. Don't do anything you'll regret. You have no idea what you'd be up against." He was right about one thing. She wasn't thinking clearly. She was thinking with a terrifying Arctic clarity she hadn't felt in years. She wasn't looking at her husband. She was looking at an opponent. "You're right," she said softly. She turned, picked up her briefcase, and walked back to the foyer. "Where are you going?" he called after her, a hint of panic in his voice. "Callie, don't be a fool. Come back here." She pressed the elevator button. "You walk out that door, Callie, and you are nothing," he roared from the bedroom. "You'll have nothing. I will ruin you." The elevator doors opened. Callie stepped in. She looked back one last time at the white marble foyer, the sterile, cold symbol of her success. It wasn't a home. It was a cage. The doors slid shut, sealing her old life inside. Callie Scott did not go to a hotel. She did not call her mother. She did not sob to her best friend over a glass of wine. She was a lawyer trained by the most ruthless minds in New York. She knew Graham. She knew his threat wasn't an emotional outburst. It was a promise. He wouldn't just divorce her. He would destroy her. He would paint her as unstable, erratic, and incompetent. He would use his PR machine to leak stories about her breakdown. He would bleed her dry in court, burying her in motions and legal fees until she was bankrupt and disbarred. She walked out of 15 Central Park West and hailed a cab. But she didn't go to JFK. She went to a bodega in the Bronx. She had what Graham didn't foresight. Years ago, while working on a case for a wealthy client terrified of his family, she had researched how to create a ghost protocol, a contingency plan, a way to vanish. She had never thought she would use it, but her meticulous nature compelled her to set it up. In a safe deposit box at a small credit union in Queens, under a name she'd created, Eleanor Scott. Her middle name and her maiden name, she had a passport, a driver's license, a social security card, and $50,000 in cash. Her first stop was an anonymous-looking office building. She used a key to enter a small 24-hour mail service, retrieving a package she'd sent to Elena Scott. Inside was a burner phone, a laptop wiped clean, and a set of keys. Her second stop was a 24-hour pharmacy. She bought hair dye, a mousy brown, cheap reading glasses, and a set of clothes so bland they were practically invisible jeans, a grey hoodie, sneakers. In the pharmacy bathroom, she changed stuffing her $5,000 suit into a trash bin. She looked at herself in the cracked mirror. The transformation was startling. Callie Perry, the legal eagle, was gone. Eleanor Scott, a woman who looked tired and beaten down by the world, stared back. She took the subway to Port Authority, a place she hadn't set foot in for a decade. The smell of diesel fumes and stale pretzels filled her lungs. She bought a one-way bus ticket to Philadelphia. In Philadelphia, she bought a ticket to Chicago. In Chicago, a ticket to Denver. In Denver, a ticket to Portland, Oregon. It was a 72-hour journey of sleepless, paranoid dread. She paid for everything in cash. She ate nothing but vending machine crackers. She spoke to no one. Back in New York, all hell was breaking loose. After 12 hours, Graham's annoyance turned to per-driven panic. He called her phone. It went straight to voicemail, as it was now at the bottom of the Hudson River. He called her office. She hadn't shown up. He did exactly what Callie predicted. He called the police, playing the role of the distraught, bewildered husband. She was just upset, he told detectives Moretti and Evans. We had a small disagreement. She's been so stressed at work, you know, partner track. It's a lot. I'm worried I'm worried she might have hurt herself. He had planted the seed. Unstable. He hired a private investigator, a former cop named Mitch Brody. But his instructions were specific. Find her, Graham said, sliding a $22,000 cash retainer across his glass desk. But don't find her too fast. Make it look good. Check hospitals, morgues, airports. I need a paper trail that shows I did everything to find my beloved, troubled wife. Brody, a cynic who'd seen this show a dozen times, just nodded. You got it, Mr. Perry. The media machine kicked in. NYC, Wonder Lawyer, vanishes, screamed the Post. Fears for missing legal eagle, Callie Scott. Graham gave a tearful press conference on the steps of their building, Sienna Reed nowhere to be seen. Callie, my love, he said, his voice cracking perfectly. If you can hear me, just come home. We can work through anything. I'm lost without you. It was a masterpiece of deception. While Graham was busy crafting his public narrative, Callie, now Elena, was starting her new life. She arrived in Portland, Oregon, a city where rain washed the streets clean, and no one cared about your last name. She used her cash to rent a small, damp studio apartment above a bakery in the Reappeared district. The smell of fresh bread and yeast woke her at 4 a.m. Every morning, a grounding, earthy smell that was the antithesis of her sterile New York life. She destroyed the burner phone. She took the new clean laptop to the public library and using their Wi-Fi, began her research. Callie Perry's life was over. The first thing she did was check the news. She saw the articles, saw Graham's crocodile tears. She saw the narrative he was building. She couldn't fight it. Not yet. She had to erase herself. She sent an anonymous encrypted email from a library computer to the managing partner at Sullivan & Cromwell. It contained a single, devastating file, the complete financials of a merger she'd worked on, proving that a senior partner had engaged in insider trading. It was her scorched earth policy. They would never sue her for breaking her contract or abandoning her cases because she had just given them a ticking bomb. They would quietly bury her departure, glad to be rid of her. Next, she liquidated the few assets she had in the Eleanor Scott name. She was methodical. She was a lawyer. She knew that to build a new identity, she had to have a legend, a backstory. Elena Scott, according to her new documents, had been a paralegal in Nevada for the last 10 years, caring for a sick mother who had recently passed. It was a simple, unverifiable, and tragic story that explained her small bank account and lack of local connections. Her first job was not in a law firm. It was as a barista. She, Callie Scott, who had once cross-examined CEOs, was now learning to steam milk and spell Caitlin with a C and 2 Y's. It was humiliating. It was grounding. It was necessary. One rainy Tuesday, a woman came in, soaked to the bone, carrying a stack of files that were bleeding ink. She looked exhausted. "Large black coffee," the woman grumbled, "and a bagel. And do you have an outlet?" "Right there," Elena said, pointing. The woman plugged in her laptop and began to work, furiously muttering to herself. "Inadmissible. Hearsay. That's a Brady violation, you son of a..." Elena watched her. She recognized the language. She recognized the desperation. "Public defender?" Elena asked, handing her the coffee. The woman looked up, surprised. "That obvious?" She took a sip. "God, that's good." "Yeah. Sarah Jenkins." She extended a hand. Elena shook it. "Elena Scott, you're prepping for trial. Prep is a strong word." Sarah scoffed. "More like triage. I've got 200 open cases and this kid is being railroaded on a possession charge. The cops' report is a complete fantasy." Elena looked at the file. "Did you file a motion to suppress based on the inconsistent chain of custody for the evidence?" Sarah stopped chewing her bagel. "Who the hell are you?" "I was a paralegal in Reno." Elena lied smoothly. "Worked a lot of criminal defense." "A paralegal, huh?" Sarah looked her over. "You talk like a lawyer, and you look like you've seen a ghost. I don't have money for a paralegal, but I have an opening for an admin assistant. It pays garbage. You start tomorrow." "Okay," Elena said. It was the first rung on a new ladder. A ladder that wasn't pointed at the sky, but at the ground. At the real, dirty, complicated truth. She had left her crystal cage. Now she was going to learn how to build something real. The Multnomah County Public Defender's Office was the exact opposite of Sullivan & Cromwell. The carpets were stained, the fluorescent lights buzzed with a sound like dying insects, and the coffee tasted like burnt gravel. Callie now, Elena loved it. Her first 6 months were a brutal education. As an admin, she was a glorified file clerk, but Sarah Jenkins, her new grizzled mentor, saw the mind behind the mousy brown hair. Sarah was a 40-year veteran of the legal trenches, a woman who ran on nicotine-righteous anger and a deep, abiding love for the U.S. Constitution. "You're not an admin, Scott," Sarah said one night, throwing a file on her desk. "You're a lawyer without a bar card. This client, Maria Gonzalez, is being evicted. Her landlord claims she never paid rent. She has receipts. The landlord's lawyer is a shark from a downtown firm. Write the response. And don't use any of that fancy New York bullshit. Make it simple. Make it bite." Elena stayed up all night. She drafted a response so tight, so legally vicious, that it not only stopped the eviction, but also laid the groundwork for a countersuit based on housing code violations. The next day, Sarah read it, a slow smile spreading across her face. "Kid," she said, "you've got a furnace in you, but right now, it's all rage. Rage just burns you out. We need to channel it. Turn it into a tool." With Sarah's sponsorship, Eleanor applied to take the Oregon State bar exam. Her legend held up. Her Nevada paralegal experience and a law degree from a school that had conveniently closed a decade prior, its records lost in a fire she'd read about, were enough to get her approved. Studying was her escape. While the news in New York was reporting that Callie Perry's case had gone cold, and she was now presumed dead. After a fruitless 2-year search, Elena Scott was memorizing Oregon's civil procedure. She passed the bar on her first try in the 99th percentile. The day she was sworn in, she didn't wear a designer suit. She wore a $100 pantsuit from a department store. Sarah Jenkins stood beside her. "You're a lawyer again, Scott," Sarah said, handing her a worn-out briefcase. "Welcome to the real fight." Elena's first years as a public defender were a blur of arraignments, plea deals, and lost cause trials. She saw the system from the bottom up. She saw how Graham's world, the world of wealth and power, manipulated the system. She saw how a rich defendant got a continuance while her client, who couldn't make bail, rotted in jail for 6 months for stealing diapers. The rage didn't fade. It cooled. It hardened. It turned from a wildfire into a blue, focused flame. She became known as the Bulldog. She was meticulous, relentless, and she hated to lose. She cross-examined police officers with a politeness that was more terrifying than any yell. She found loopholes in search warrants. She saved people. But it wasn't enough. "You're winning battles, Elena, but we're losing the war," Sarah told her over cheap whiskey one night. "You're a great lawyer, but the problem isn't always the lawyers. It's the bench. It's the judges who set an unpayable bail. It's the judges who believe a cop's word over a civilian's every single time. That's where the power is." A new seed was planted. Elena built her new life with the same obsessive precision she had built her old one. She worked for 8 years in the PD's office. She built a reputation. She made no friends, but she earned universal respect. She was quiet, lived alone, and her only hobby was the law. During this time, Graham Perry was thriving. After having Callie declared legally dead in absentia, after 7 years, he had inherited her entire estate, which he'd benevolently rolled into a charitable foundation in her name, the Callie Scott Center for Troubled Women. It was a PR coup. He had married Sienna Reed in a lavish ceremony in Lake Como. Perry Dynamics had gone public, and Graham was on the cover of Forbes, Time, and Wired. He was an icon, a visionary, who was saving American logistics. Elena watched it all from her small apartment, the glowing screen of her laptop reflecting in her glasses. She felt nothing. No, that was a lie. She felt a cold, patient anticipation. When a state judgeship opened up, Sarah pushed her to apply. "You're kidding," Elena said. "They want a prosecutor, a former DA. They don't want a public defender." "They want someone smart," Sarah countered. "They want someone who knows the law backward and forward. And you, my friend, are the smartest lawyer in this state." She applied. She was interviewed by the governor's panel. They were tough. "Ms. Scott, your entire career has been defense." One panelist, a former corporate lawyer, said dismissively. "How can you be an impartial arbiter of justice?" Elena leaned forward. "With respect, sir, my job hasn't been defense. My job has been the Constitution. I have spent a decade defending the rights guaranteed to all citizens, not just the ones who can afford to. I haven't just read the law. I've seen the consequences of its misapplication in human lives. I would argue that makes me more impartial, not less. I understand the weight of my decisions, because I've had to look the people they affect in the eye every single day." She got the appointment. The day she first put on the black robe, it felt heavier than she could have imagined. She was Judge Elena Scott of the Oregon Circuit Court. She was good at it. She was tough, but she was fair. She listened. She was unswayable by emotional appeals, but deeply moved by facts and law. She gained a reputation as a judge's judge. 2 years later, a spot opened on the U.S. District Court for the District of Oregon. A federal judgeship, a lifetime appointment. A senator whose own son, Elena, had inadvertently helped by sentencing him to a rigorous rehab program instead of prison, nominated her. The FBI background check was the part she dreaded. They would dig. They would find Elena Scott. They would find the Nevada legend. She prepared for it. She confessed to the vetting committee. "My mother's death was traumatic. I moved here to start over. I am not proud of the gaps in my record, but they were born of grief, not malice. My record since arriving in Oregon, however, is an open book." They dug. They found the Nevada legend. They found the closed law school. They found a life of quiet, unassuming work. They contrasted it with her brilliant, spotless 10-year record in Oregon. They concluded she was a late bloomer, a private person whose life truly began when she moved to Portland. She was confirmed by the Senate. 98-2. On a cold January morning, 10 years after she had fled into the night, Elena Scott took her final oath. She was now the Honorable Judge Elena Scott, a federal judge with lifetime tenure. She had all the power. And she had all the patience. She knew with the certainty of a gravitational pull that a man like Graham Perry, who believed he was a god, would one day find himself in a courtroom. She just had to wait. Graham Perry didn't just fly. He soared. With Callie legally dead and her assets absorbed, and with the sleek, beautiful Sienna on his arm, he was untouchable. Perry Dynamics wasn't just a company. It was a phenomenon. Its stock, THRN, was a rocket that only went up. Graham was the new king of tech, the AI oracle, the man who promised a future of perfect, seamless efficiency. But the future was built on a lie. Perry Dynamics wasn't a revolutionary AI company. It was a shell. The Prometheus algorithm that supposedly predicted shipping routes was just a fancy screensaver. The company's staggering profits weren't from logistics. They were from a sophisticated pump and dump scheme. Graham was using investor money to buy his own stock through offshore shell corporations, artificially inflating its value. He would then sell off his personal shares at the peak, leaving the investors' pension funds, retirement accounts, everyday people holding the bag when the price inevitably collapsed. It was bold, it was arrogant, and for a long time it was successful. The problem was David Chen. Agent David Chen of the SEC's San Francisco office was not a bulldog. He was a bloodhound. He was a quiet, meticulous forensic accountant who didn't care about Forbes covers or charismatic CEOs. He cared about numbers, and the numbers at Perry Dynamics didn't add up. "It's too smooth," he told his supervisor, pointing to a stock chart. "The growth, it's unnatural. There are no corrections, no market responses. It's manufactured." Chen started pulling threads. He started in the Cayman Islands. He found a shell corporation, Reed Holdings, which was buying millions in THRN stock. Reed, like Sienna Reed Graham's new wife. It was sloppy, arrogant. Chen dug deeper. He found another shell corporation, this one older, based in Delaware. EV Capital. E.V. Chen, being meticulous, pulled the public records on Graham Perry. He read about the tragic disappearance of his first wife, Callie Scott. E.V. He's using his dead wife's name as a shell corp. Chen whispered, a feeling of disgust rising in his throat. He was wrong, in a way. Graham hadn't set it up after she died. He had set it up before she disappeared. The betrayal was deeper than Callie ever knew. Graham had been planning to frame her for his initial fraud. Her vanishing was a happy accident, one that allowed him to pivot and create the troubled woman narrative. Chen found his in, not with a high-level exec, but with a mid-level accountant named Thomas Green. Green had been with Perry Dynamics from the beginning. He was a true believer, but he had been diagnosed with stage 4 pancreatic cancer and given 6 months to live. He wanted to clear his conscience. "I built the framework," Thomas confessed to Chen from his hospice bed, his voice a reedy whisper. "He told me it was aggressive accounting, standard practice for a disruptive tech firm. But then he set up the EV Capital account. He told me it was to protect Callie's assets. But he did it before she left. He was going to put it all on her. And when she vanished, he just kept going." Thomas Green had the ledgers, the real ones. He had kept a copy of everything on a private server, his insurance policy. He handed Agent Chen the password. "He's a black hole," Green whispered. "He consumes everything. Go get him." The arrest was not a quiet affair. Graham wouldn't have wanted that. Chen and the FBI coordinated the takedown for maximum impact. They didn't arrest him at his office or his penthouse. They waited for the Future Forward Gala, a $50,000 a plate charity event held at the new Perry Dynamics campus in Austin, Texas. Graham was on stage under a spotlight, a microphone in his hand. Sienna, dripping in diamonds, was at his side. He was announcing a new $10 billion green energy initiative. "The future isn't just about speed," Graham proclaimed to the adoring crowd. "It's about responsibility." Graham Perry. The voice cut through the applause. Agent David Chen, flanked by 6 FBI agents, walked calmly down the center aisle. "Graham Perry, you are under arrest for 12 counts of wire fraud, 2 counts of securities fraud, and 1 count of conspiracy to obstruct justice." The room went silent. A Vanity Fair reporter's flashbulb was the only sound, a sharp pop. Graham laughed. He actually laughed. "Is this a joke, David, is it? From the SEC, I told you my books are open. You're making a terrible mistake, and you're embarrassing yourselves. Mr. Perry, put your hands behind your back. The smile vanished. Don't you touch me. Sienna started to scream. He's an honest man. You can't do this. Sienna Reed Perry, Chen said, not even looking at her as another agent cuffed her. You are under arrest as a co-conspirator. The cuffs clicked onto Graham's wrists, the cold, hard steel. This was real. The cameras were flashing. His whole world, his entire carefully constructed universe of fame and power was collapsing in on him in real time. You're dead, Chen. Graham snarled, his mask of civility vaporized. I will end you. I will own your house. You have no idea who I am. You're right, Chen said, his voice flat. Up until now, we only had a theory. But thanks to Mr. Green, we know exactly who you are. You're a common thief, Mr. Perry. And you're going to prison. As he was dragged off the stage, his fall was broadcast live on every business network in the world. The case was a federal one, spanning multiple states. The prosecution, led by the U.S. Attorney's Office, was massive. The defense, led by the most expensive lawyer in the country. Julian Croft was prepared for war. The case was complex, involving offshore accounts and intricate digital trails. The U.S. Attorney's Office in New York was swamped. The office in Texas had a conflict of interest. The case was moved, as often happens in complex multi-jurisdictional fraud trials, to a neutral Federal District 1, known for its efficiency and its tough, no-nonsense judges. The case, the United States versus Graham Perry, was assigned to the District of Oregon, and by random electronic lottery, it was assigned to the docket of the Honorable Judge Eleanor Scott. When Elena saw the case file appear on her monitor, she didn't gasp. She didn't smile. She simply took a sip of her cold coffee, her hand as steady as the granite of the courthouse itself. The universe was not chaotic. It was just. The courtroom was a pressure cooker. Courtroom 16A of the Mark O. Hatfield United States Courthouse was packed. Every seat was taken by journalists from the Wall Street Journal, Bloomberg, and Vanity Fair. Sketch artists sharpened their pencils. This wasn't just a trial. It was the execution of a king. Graham Perry, out on a $50 million bond, walked in like he owned the place. His suit was a $24,000 Tom Ford. His hair was perfect. He smiled at the sketch artists, a knowing, confident smirk. He was performing. He was Graham Perry, the innovator, the victim of a jealous government. His lead counsel, Julian Croft, was a legal silverback, a man who charged $2,500 an hour and was worth every penny. He whispered reassurances to Graham, who was busy checking the THRN stock, which had plummeted 90% on his phone. Sienna, her own trial, severed from his, was nowhere to be seen. She was, Croft had assured him, under control. It's a simple case, Croft whispered. It all hinges on the word of a dead accountant and a jilted model. We'll discredit them. We'll paint Chen as a zealot. You'll be back in your penthouse by Christmas. Just get it done, Graham muttered, adjusting his silk tie. A side door opened. A bailiff with a booming voice stepped forward. All rise. The courtroom rustled to its feet. Graham stood, but he was looking at his phone again, firing off an angry text to his PR team. The United States District Court for the District of Oregon is now in session. The Honorable Judge Eleanor Scott presiding. Graham didn't look up. Scott. He'd never heard of her. A nobody. A state school appointee from the middle of nowhere. Good. She'd be easy to intimidate. The judge entered and took the bench, a small, dark-haired woman in plain black robes. "You may be seated," the bailiff said. Graham sat sliding his phone into his pocket. "Good morning, counsel," the judge said. Her voice was clear, cold, and carried a metallic precision that cut through the air. And it was that voice that made Graham Perry's world stop. It was impossible. It was a phantom. It was the voice that had haunted his nightmares and occasionally his guilt-ridden daydreams for 10 years. He looked up. His vision tunneled. The journalists, the lawyers, the jury box. It all faded to a dull grey. All he could see was the woman on the bench. It was her. She was different. The long, honey-blonde hair was gone, replaced by a severe dark brown bob. She wore no makeup, save for a dash of lipstick. She wore small, rectangular glasses. And her eyes, her warm, laughing eyes, were gone. In their place were 2 chips of obsidian, cold and impassive. But it was Callie. Graham made a sound. A strangled gasp halfway between a laugh and a choke. "Callie," he whispered. The judge's eyes, which had been scanning the docket, flicked to him. There was not a flicker of recognition, not a hint of emotion. "Mr. Perry," she said, her voice like ice on steel, "you will be silent unless addressed by the court." Graham's lawyer, Julian Croft, looked at his client, then at the judge, confused. "But that's—" Graham stood up, pointing a trembling finger. "Callie, what is this? What are you doing here?" The courtroom exploded. Reporters lunged for the doors. The sketch artists drew frantically. Bang, bang, bang! The sound of the gavel was like a gunshot. "Order!" Judge Scott's voice didn't rise, but it sliced through the chaos. "Order in this court!" Croft, white as a sheet, grabbed Graham's arm. "Graham, sit down. What are you doing?" "That's my wife," Graham yelled, his voice cracking. "That's Callie. She's supposed to be dead." Judge Scott stared at him. Her face was granite. "Mr. Perry, I am holding you in contempt. Bailiff, detain the defendant." 2 marshals moved in, grabbing Graham's arms. "No, get off me!" Graham struggled, his composure shattering completely. "Callie, it's me. It's Graham." "You can't do this. This is a setup." "Mr. Croft," the judge said, her voice dangerously calm, as she ignored the struggling defendant. "You have 5 seconds to get your client under control, or I will have him bound and gagged for the remainder of this proceeding. This trial will proceed." "Graham," Croft hissed, his face inches from Perry's. "Shut up, now! You are destroying your own case. Let me handle this." Graham, hyperventilating, finally slumped into his chair, surrounded by marshals. He stared at the woman on the bench. It was her. It was his lost, broken wife. And she was a federal judge. Croft stood adjusting his suit. He was a shark and he smelled blood, he just didn't know whose. "Your Honor," Croft said, his voice smooth as silk, "I must, humbly, request an immediate recess. And I must, with all due respect, file an immediate verbal motion for recusal." "On what grounds, Mr. Croft?" Judge Scott asked, her pen hovering over a notepad. "On the grounds, Your Honor, that you are the defendant's wife, Callie Scott Perry, who, as you know, was declared legally dead 7 years ago." The courtroom gasped. Judge Scott did not blink. She set her pen down slowly. "Mr. Croft," she said, "let's be clear on the facts. The court's name is Eleanor Scott. Callie Perry was a person declared deceased by the state of New York, a proceeding, I might add, that your client initiated, and from which he financially benefited. She looked directly at Graham, her eyes pinning him to his chair. The defendant is not on trial for matrimony. He is on trial for securities fraud. This court has no personal, financial, or emotional connection to the defendant. I have never met a Graham Perry in my capacity as a citizen of Oregon. My judicial record is spotless. Your motion is based on a fantasy. Motion denied. Your Honor, this is an outrage, Croft sputtered. You are welcome to appeal my ruling to the Ninth Circuit, Mr. Croft, the judge said, her voice bored. But you will do so on your own time. This trial begins now. The U.S. Attorney's Office will please call its first witness. Graham Perry watched his blood roaring in his ears. This wasn't justice. This was revenge. This was a nightmare. He wasn't in a courtroom. He was in a tomb. And Callie, his unstable, dramatic Callie, had just sealed the door. The trial was a masterclass in meticulous, brutal precision. Julian Croft immediately appealed to the Ninth Circuit to have Judge Scott recused. The appellate court, in a rare emergency ruling, reviewed the facts. They found that Judge Elena Scott, a sitting federal judge with a decade of unblemished judicial conduct, had no legal connection to Callie Perry, a woman declared dead in another state. The recusal was denied. The trial would continue. Graham was trapped. The prosecution, led by David Chen, who was now sitting second chair to the U.S. Attorney, began to build their case, brick by brick. The first witness was Thomas Green, the accountant. He testified via a pre-recorded deposition from his hospice bed. His skeletal face, projected on a giant screen, was damning. Mr. Green, the prosecutor asked, who gave the order to create the offshore entity EV Capital? Graham Perry, Green whispered. He told me, and I quote, "It's time to put Callie's name to work." And when was this, Mr. Green? October 10th, a full week before his wife disappeared. Croft's cross-examination was brutal. Mr. Green, isn't it true you were a disgruntled employee, that you were fired for incompetence? I was fired for getting cancer, Green replied, and for asking too many questions. Judge Scott presided with an impartiality that was in itself a form of torture. She sustained one of Croft's objections when the prosecutor tried to introduce evidence that was clearly hearsay. Your Honor, the prosecutor protested. Mr. Harris, Judge Scott said coolly, you are aware of Federal Rule of Evidence 801. This is not a state court. You will not testify for your witness. The objection is sustained. The jury will disregard the prosecutor's last statement. Graham watched bewildered. She was helping him. He felt a sudden insane surge of hope. Maybe she still loved him. Maybe this was her way of showing him she was fair before she... What let him go? His hope was short-lived. The next day, the prosecution called Sienna Reed Perry. Sienna, who had been given a lighter sentence in exchange for her full testimony, walked into the courtroom. She looked nothing like the supermodel she had been. Her hair was a mousy brown. She wore a simple grey dress. She refused to look at Graham. Ms. Reed, the prosecutor began, please describe your role at Perry Dynamics. I was... the face, Sienna said, her voice trembling. I was in charge of the charity wings, the foundations. And were these foundations legitimate? No, she whispered. They were awash. We'd raise $20 million at a gala, donate $1 million, and funnel the other 19 into offshore accounts, into Reed Holdings and EV Capital. And who directed you to do this? Sienna finally looked at Graham, her eyes filled with a mixture of hatred and fear. He did, Graham. He said it was just smart business. Now it was Croft's turn. He approached Sienna like a predator. Reed, you were his wife, were you not? You benefited from this smart business. Yes. Diamonds, cars. A home in Lake Como. You enjoyed the fruits of this fraud, did you not? Yes, and isn't it true, Ms. Reed, that you are testifying today to save your own skin, that you were offered a deal, bury your husband, and you get probation? Objection, the prosecutor yelled. Assumes facts not in evidence. Sustained, Judge Scott said, her voice flat. Mr. Croft, rephrase. Isn't it true, Ms. Reed, that your testimony is bought and paid for by the U.S. government? Sienna started to cry. He made me. He forced me. He said if I ever left him, he would what, Ms. Reed? Croft pressed, smelling victory. He said he would make me disappear, just like Callie. He said he knew how to do it. The courtroom went dead silent. The prosecutor's eyes widened. This was new. Croft was stunned. He had overplayed his hand. Objection. Hearsay speculation. Overruled. Judge Scott said, her voice a razor. It goes to the witness's state of mind and motive. The statement will stand. Graham surged to his feet. She's lying. I never said that, Callie. Tell them she's lying. Bang, bang. Mr. Perry, you are in contempt. One more outburst, and I will have you removed from your own trial. Mr. Croft, your witness is unraveling. I suggest you conclude your cross-examination. Croft, pale and shaking, had no more questions. The trial lasted 3 weeks. It was a parade of damning evidence. Ledgers, bank transfers, emails. One by one, Graham's innovations were revealed as nothing more than elaborate digital lies. Graham watched Callie Judge Scott the entire time. He tried to catch her eye. He tried to send her a look of apology, of remorse, of shared history. He got nothing. She never looked at him. She looked at the lawyers. She looked at the jury. She looked at the evidence. It was as if he was just another piece of furniture in her courtroom. His arrogance, his wealth, his charm, they were all useless. He had no power here. She had taken it all. Finally, it was time for closing arguments. The prosecutor was devastating. Graham Perry is a man who built a $10 billion empire on a lie. He didn't just steal money, he stole futures. He stole the retirement of your parents. He stole the college funds of your children. And he did it all while hiding behind the name of his own dead wife. He is a man without a soul, without a conscience, and he must be held accountable. Croft's defense was weak, but he was a professional. My client is a visionary. Did he push the boundaries? Yes. Did he engage in aggressive accounting? Absolutely. But was it criminal? The government has built its case on the words of a dying, vengeful accountant and a bitter, co-conspiring ex-model. This is a witch hunt. Graham Perry is not a criminal. He is an innovator. Don't let the government punish success. The jury, a panel of 9 women and 3 men, teachers, plumbers, nurses, deliberated for 8 hours. The knock on the door came. They had a verdict. All rise. Judge Scott took the bench. Graham felt like he was going to be sick. He was, for the first time in his life, terrified. Mr. Foreman, Judge Scott said, has the jury reached a verdict? We have your honor. And on the charge of conspiracy to commit wire fraud, how do you find guilty? A sob escaped Sienna's mother in the gallery. On the charge of securities fraud, count 1, how do you find guilty? On the charge of securities fraud, count 2, how do you find till guilty? It went on. 12 counts, all guilty. Graham Perry crumpled. He physically fell into his chair, his $20,000 suit deflating. It was over. Julian Croft put a hand on his shoulder, but Graham shook it off. He stared at the woman on the bench. She was impassive. She betrayed no triumph, no satisfaction. She simply nodded. "The jury is thanked for its service," she said. "Sentencing will be held in 48 hours. The defendant's bail is revoked. He will be remanded to federal custody." "No!" Graham screamed, a primal sound of pure terror. "No! You can't! Callie, please don't do this!" The marshals grabbed him, hauling him to his feet. "Callie, I loved you. I always loved you. It was a mistake. Please don't." "Send me to jail." "You can't." "Judge Elena." Scott looked at him. For the first time, she looked at him, not as a defendant, not as a case file, as Graham. And her eyes were filled with an emptiness so vast and cold, it stopped his heart. "Mr. Perry," she said, "I have no idea who you're talking to." She banged the gavel. "This court is adjourned." The 48 hours Graham spent in the Multnomah County Detention Center were a descent into hell. The Tom Ford suit was replaced by a stiff orange jumpsuit. The Patek Philippe watch was gone. The smell of his sterile penthouse was replaced by the smell of industrial disinfectant body odor and fear. He didn't sleep. He alternated between fits of uncontrollable rage, screaming at the guards that he owned them, and pathetic, racking sobs. He met with Julian Croft, who told him the grim truth. "There's no appeal, Graham. Not from her court. Her rulings were ironclad. She gave us more leeway than a neutral judge would have, just to make sure the verdict was unimpeachable. She's brilliant. We're not appealing the verdict. We're begging for mercy." "Mercy," Graham spat. "From her, it's all we have." He was led back into courtroom 16A in chains. The journalists were back. The show was not over. "All rise." Judge Scott entered. She looked exactly the same. Calm, cold, robed. "Mr. Perry," she said, "you have been found guilty by a jury of your peers on 12 counts of fraud and conspiracy. This is the time for sentencing. The prosecution has recommended the maximum sentence of 25 years. The defense has argued for 5, citing your contributions to technology and your lack of prior convictions. Mr. Croft, does your client have anything to say before this court passes sentence?" Croft nudged Graham. Graham stood his chains, rattling. He looked at the jury box, then at the press, then at the woman who was once his wife. He had one last card to play. "Your Honor," he began, his voice hoarse. "I know I have. I have made mistakes, financial mistakes. But the biggest mistake was a personal one. 10 years ago, I broke the heart of a woman I loved. I was arrogant. I was a fool. I drove her away. And I have lived with that guilt every single day." He was crying, real thick tears. "And now she's here. And I see this is not justice. This is a wife's revenge." "Callie, Your Honor, I am not just on trial for fraud. I am on trial for us, and for that I am truly sorry. I am sorry for breaking your heart. Please show me the mercy you deserved." It was a brilliant performance. The courtroom was silent. A reporter was crying. Judge Elena Scott listened. Her face was unreadable. She let the silence hang in the air for a full minute, drawing out his pathetic performance. Then she began to speak. "Mr. Perry," she said, her voice clear and carrying to every corner of the room, "you have confused this court with a confessional, and you have confused your personal failings with your criminal acts. They are not the same." She took off her glasses, polishing them slowly. "You speak of mistakes. A mistake is forgetting to take out the trash. A mistake is spilling coffee. Systematically creating a $10 billion fraudulent enterprise, destroying the life savings of thousands of families, and attempting to frame your own wife for it is not a mistake. It is a choice. It is a series of deliberate, malicious, and greedy choices repeated every single day for a decade." She put her glasses back on. "You speak of contributions to technology. This court has seen the evidence. Your only contribution was a marketing slogan. You are a parasite, Mr. Perry, a man who attached himself to the hard work of others and claimed it as his own. You produced nothing. You built nothing. You only took." She leaned forward. "And finally, you speak of this court's personal motive. You stand there and accuse me of bias. Let me be clear. Callie Perry, the woman you believe I am, was a woman who loved the law, a woman who believed in justice, a woman who, if she were here, would be the first to demand you be held accountable. But Callie Perry is not here. She was declared dead. You had her declared dead. You held a memorial service for her. You collected her assets. You mourned her, all while using her name to further your crimes. So you will not address me as Callie. You will not speak of a broken heart. The only thing this court recognizes is your crime. You operated under the delusion that wealth was a shield, and that human beings were mere instruments for your ambition. You confused celebrity with character. The law, however, makes no such distinction. It is the great equalizer." She stood to her full height. "This court has listened to the recommendations. It has weighed the staggering, immeasurable damage you have inflicted on society, on your victims, and on the very concept of public trust. It is the judgment of this court that you, Graham Perry, be sentenced to the maximum security federal penitentiary for a term of 25 years. There will be no possibility of parole." "No!" Graham roared a primal scream. "You are further ordered to pay $4.7 billion in restitution to your victims, though this court acknowledges that is a sum you will never be able to repay." She looked not at Graham, but at the U.S. Marshal. "Get him out of my courtroom." The Marshal seized him. He was no longer a man. He was a collapsing star, a black hole of his own making. "Callie, you can't. I'll kill you." "I'll kill you," he screamed, his face purple with rage, all pretense of remorse gone. Judge Scott did not flinch. She watched as he was dragged kicking and screaming from the courtroom, the heavy oak doors slamming shut behind him, sealing his fate. The courtroom was silent. Judge Elena Scott looked at the empty defense table. She adjusted her robes. "This court is adjourned," she said, and banged the gavel one last time. She walked into her chambers, her footsteps even and sure. She did not look back. She sat at her desk, and for a long moment, she just stared at the wall. Then she picked up the next file. A dry, boring corporate patent dispute. She opened it, uncapped her pen, and began to read. The work of justice was never done. What a story. A 10-year journey from a shattered penthouse to a federal judge's bench. Graham Perry thought he was untouchable, that his money and his power made him a god. But he forgot one thing true: justice, like karma, has a long memory. The wife he tried to erase and declare dead was the one woman who had the patience and the power to hand him the consequences he deserved. He didn't just lose his company. He lost his freedom, his name, and his entire life, all at the hands of the woman he so carelessly threw away. What do you think? Was this the perfect revenge, or was it pure, cold justice? Let me know your thoughts in the comments below. If you loved this story of karma and dramatic twists, please make sure to hit that like button, share this video with someone who needs to see justice served, and most importantly, smash that subscribe button and ring the notification bell. We drop stories like this every week, and you don't want to miss what happens next. Thanks for listening.